1 year ago, when we had our La Grace Integral Yoga Retreat online, one of the questions which was discussed was how to prepare ourselves for Sri Aurobindo's 150th anniversary, which was a year away and which is now for us a month away. And there were many discussions of forms in which people could do things. And my response, though, was a bit different, which may not be perhaps suitable for everybody, but which is the way I feel is my priority at least, and to the extent that you feel so aligned, you may find helpful as your priorities. My response was, whatever you wish to do for that 150th occasion, are you going to wait for 1 year? Or would you rather do it now? What would be the point of waiting? Let's say you've prepared a beautiful dinner or birthday cake. Will you wait 1 year and then give it on that occasion? Or would you rather share it now? And a second aspect to the question, why is there so much attention around this 150th birthday? What is the significance of this number? Or is the birthday in any way different because it is 150 and not 149 or 151? Think about it. For the human mind, especially with our own birthdays, 50 years, wow, it's an occasion. It symbolizes a dramatic passage of time that we have survived together. You know, people say it's a 50th wedding anniversary. So you say, wow, we've managed to survive 50 years. And 50 becomes symbolic of a significant, dramatic endpoint. Yes, maybe there's a value to it, because not many reach 50. They break up sooner often. But with Sri Aurobindo's birthday, or with your own birthday, what is the meaning? Sometimes numbers are symbolic. To that extent it has a value. But is Sri Aurobindo's 150th birthday 1.5 times more important than his 100th birthday? And on his 200th birthday, will you need to do something far more dramatic to exceed what you did for the 150th? That's typically the instinct in the human beings when we celebrate. For the 100th birthday we did so much, 150th it should be so much more. There is a side to this. The government of India naturally wakes up. Oh, Sri Aurobindo is also existing, and it's the 150th birthday. It's good for them to be reminded and to wake them up to this fact of Sri Aurobindo's contribution. But when it comes to the action, you know what happens with governments. They created a committee of 50 people, of which I think 45 have no idea of Sri Aurobindo, of which 40 at least are politicians, and of those I think only in the first meeting only 32 or 35 even bothered to join an online meeting. The rest didn't bother. Because in the politician's agenda there is, okay, now we have a meeting for discussing how much kickbacks we will get for this project, and then the secretary says, next you have an online Zoom meeting for Sri Aurobindo's 150th anniversary. Okay, what's after that? Oh, there's another kickback coming from that particular business that needs a clearance. Okay, let's skip the online meeting. That's the priority level for most of them. And of course there are exceptions. And the exceptions always are, okay, give me points. What do I have to say for him? How will it help my base of electorates? So you don't expect much out of it. The only thing which I've seen so far announced of some value is they will bring out a book with 150 articles by philosophers, scholars from 150 universities or something like that. And again, for them it will be, okay, what do we write about? Put something together and you get 150. And A few months down, a year down, it's somebody else's 150th anniversary, bring out another volume. The same people will write something else. So in my estimate, in my view, it's not very useful. And the question I asked at that time in the discussion last year, do you recall the 125th birth celebrations or 100th birth celebrations and what was done then and what value does it have today? What of those celebrations have remained today? Remember, I think it was 130th or some celebration or 125th. The only thing the government of India did, they printed a 1 rupee coin with Sri Aurobindo's picture, which was very badly done as a picture anyway. You hardly recognize it's Sri Aurobindo. And that was it. That's all that remains of it today. Has it changed anything? In the government's thinking, in India's administrative framework, in the vision for the nation's development, in the lives of the people of India, in the hearts or minds of those who turn to Sri Aurobindo's teaching or yoga? Practically, I would say zero. Or if anything, there was a momentary ripple which subsided. Will that be the same case with the 150th anniversary? So I would like to focus upon the program that would be useful, at least for those of us who feel we need to do something that 5 years down we can look back and say, yes, what we did in the last 5 years was worthy of that occasion or of other occasions. I'll make an even correction to that, because if 15th August is the 150th anniversary, instead of waiting to do something on 15th August, why not do it today? So that on the 15th August, there will be a change in who you are already, right? So if you do something today and you have grown, and for the 15th August, tomorrow you will do something more, and day after something more, and on 14th August, you will already be much closer to something which is more worthwhile of the 15th, that you can observe the 15th in a worthwhile manner, and then on the 16th, you can continue that action to develop further for what you have received on the 15th, and then on the 17th, and then on the 18th, and all through the rest of your life. That would be a useful program, isn't it? So let's start today. Let's start now. And every day for the rest of our lives. And perhaps we will meet also the 150th anniversary in a worthwhile manner, and then the 151st and 52nd, or perhaps we may take the occasion that today is Sri Aurobindo's birthday, and every day for the rest of our lives. Not only his birthday, the Divine Mother's birthday, our birthday, where we are newborn every single morning. And that would be much more useful from a spiritual point of view, isn't it? Every day should be the birthday and a sacred occasion for a leap. From the perspective of the divine consciousness, the position of the earth in relation to the sun does not matter. The date according to the calendar you have is irrelevant, because the calendar itself is different in different systems of time counting. The date is different on different parts of the earth. What is useful from the divine's point of view, which makes the occasion special, is the fact that people wake up that day and say, today is Sri Aurobindo's birthday. Or you say for yourself, today is my birthday, what will I do? Oh yes, it's a special day, I must do something special, I must open and prepare myself for what's going to happen. And so everybody wakes up and opens to receive, even if momentarily, for those half an hour of the meditation that you might do. And that's an occasion for the divine to fill you and to fill humanity, isn't it? So the date becomes special because of the importance that we give to it and the poise of consciousness that we take for that occasion, which ideally we should be doing every day. Eventually every moment, but that's too far already, too difficult. But every day for 5 minutes or 1 minute, that's possible, that's doable. Not only that, when you just choose the date, the fact that you chose creates a shift in the collective consciousness. And on a collective level, a greater receptivity is created by the fact that you concentrate on that date. I had a very interesting experience for a certain year. You see, in the ashram, our birthday is sacrosanct because that's the day we went to meet the mother, because the idea behind is that on that day the soul is most receptive and open to the divine help and so on. So many times I had occasion where somebody asked me to travel and I would always refuse for the birthday. I had even an occasion in Europe, there was a program and it was starting on my birthday, which is the next morning. So I did my birthday and took the flight out the same night. But I refused to leave a day earlier because birthday is sacrosanct. And then it came that there was a program with the Indian Navy, and I had to be there a few days before. They could not change their dates, and it was too important to refuse. And I said, this is the challenge now. So I decided I will observe my birthday. I took a date 4 days before, which was convenient. What was fascinating was I did everything as I would on my birthday. You know, we go to Sri Aurobindo's room, you wake up with all the special feeling. Everything was like a perfect birthday. In the experience, in the flatus you feel, in what you receive, and all those usual things. And I could not have known the date was so different. And then we left, we went to that place, and then the technical date of my birthday, we were in the middle of a conference, completely flat day. From that perspective. Interesting. The fact that you decided to shift the date and aligned yourself with that intention, from the divine point of view, okay, you're ready, here's your birthday gift. Isn't it? And if this is the case individually, it's much more the case collectively. So yes, it's a great occasion, it's a very important occasion, but what you need to do for it must begin now and must continue after every single day of your life. And maybe 150 is a special occasion and there will be many other occasions. One of the biggest tricks of the anti-evolutionary forces is to create an argument for delay, to postpone. I want to touch upon this a little bit so that we fully appreciate the importance of this. You will recall in the year 2000 or a few years before the year 2000, in many religious traditions there was this idea, oh now finally there will be the second coming. Because it's a special date, 2000 years have passed. Wait for it, something great is going to happen. Once that excitement fades and nothing happened, the next focal point was 2012, the Mayan calendar. It's the end of an era, it's the end of an age. The world will be destroyed and finally we will have the liberation into a kind of a heaven. Right? And then they went into some pretty weird science to justify this, saying Earth's position in relation to the center of the galaxy will be just perfectly aligned and there'll be rays that will come and suddenly everybody will be lifted into some rapture of ecstasy or spirituality or a third or fifth dimension, depending on what you were reading, channeled material coming through about being lifted in, and all the bad people will be left behind on earth and the good people will be taken across into some other domain. You must have seen all that. And there were people who were so convinced of it. And they said, you see, the Mayans, they dematerialized, they went into some higher sphere, they had the technology. And so some of them actually went to the Mayan regions and said, we're going to get pulled up into this fifth dimension. And I had a talk in the United States a year before, and somebody asked, what about 21st December 2012? I said, it's going to be just one more beautiful day, as will be the next, and the next, and the next. Of course, that did happen, and for those who had got excited about being transported into some fifth dimension, they all said, did you feel the shift? Now it has begun, a new age, a new shift, a new consciousness has started, the rays from the central galaxy have come upon us. Actually, that was all nonsense, because the size of the center of the galaxy is so many millions of light years, and the Earth in relation to that cannot even move that much over a few million years. Right? So the whole thing was nonsense, but it was spread around in social media with these quotations which sounded scientific. Evolution does not work that way. But what happened was, in that phase of waiting, 10 years down, 2012, it's going to happen, what was the message? Wait. Do nothing. And much of this came through the channeled material. On this date, there will be this shift into fifth dimension. So what do? You just wait. almost all the channeled material, and I've had occasion over the years to see this, now going back to the 1980s, which one of the early books which was very popular was We Are the Earthquake Generation. And that channeled material marking on maps where in all over the world there would be earthquakes, land going underwater. Nothing of the sort happened. But what was the message in all the channeled material? It will happen because of a change in the cosmos. Sun will align, the planets will align, the change will take place. Wait. In all the religious traditions which are of the ascetic kind, wait is the message. And the same you see even in the Indian religious and spiritual or even yoga traditions which are ascetic. Implied somewhere in the message, yes, of course, do your yoga. But the thing will happen when the time comes. Wait. Keep on doing your practice. I've heard this stated in gatherings of so many religious leaders. The message is, well, why isn't it happening? Wait. Keep on doing your practice. Do it harder. Eventually it will happen. When? When God decides. I meet people who are students of Sri Aurobindo, and with great pain and distress, when will Mother give me the experience? For last so many years I have struggled, I have worked, I have done the yoga. I've been doing the yoga for so many years, and still I'm waiting for when the experience will come. I said, what are you doing as yoga? I'm doing karma yoga every day. Okay? What do you do? Every day I go, I work in the garden, I do this, I do that, he gives me the sequence. And okay, where is the karma yoga? And that's my karma yoga. Where is the mother when you're doing this? Blank. How is it karma yoga if it is not work consecrated to the mother? And it struck him. The point is, you are doing things, practices, for the sake of the practice itself. There's even an article of Sri Aurobindo which is quite disturbing for those who are more in the traditional forms of practice, where he says that the benefit of many of these traditional practices and routines is only to enhance the ego. So many more pranayams I have done today, so many more asanas I have done today, and so I feel I have done more, but what use of that is it? How has it changed your consciousness? Probably not much. Oh, it made my body a little bit comfortable, stretched, energized. That's about it. If you see most of the current new agey yoga type movements in India, most of them have a particular kriya or activity or initiated routine that they put you through. If you observe what they are some kind of pranayam practices, breathing, etc., which amplify life force. What spiritual value? What do they demand of their followers in terms of spiritual practice? Practically nothing. And so in a sense one cannot even say that they're spiritual movements. They have a social value, they have a moral, ethical, other values, but there's not much spirituality in the principal objectives even. And even in the practices in the students of Sri Aurobindo and integral yoga, this idea of wait, it will happen when mother decides. And I find it extremely irritating because it is such a falsehood. It is such a lie. I have people I've meet and they say, oh, we're waiting to come to Pondicherry, we want to visit. And I say, of course, come. When will you come? We're waiting. When mother will call us, we will come. So I said, but mother is calling you right now. No. When she calls. It's a self-deception of a very crude kind, but very satisfying for the devotional heart, because there is a saying in the devotional space that it will happen when God decides. You will go when it's your time. Okay, who decided it's my time? No, someone else. So you've thrown away the entire responsibility from yourself And then you blame God for not having chosen. I'm waiting for so many years, one day He will call me. What a waste of time, isn't it? And unfortunately, this has seeped in deeply into the space of Sri Aurobindo's influence. From outside, of course. And in the ashram, you will find people similarly saying and doing things. People who come with great aspiration are told, no, that's not the way to do it. You should do your work and Mother will do the rest. It will happen when it has to happen. And of course, nothing happens. Even to the extent there are people who have been there for 50 years who have no idea what the practice of the yoga is. Because that's not what Mother told us. Mother told us to be children and play in the playground. We continue to play. But when it was the sadhaks of the ashram, Mother sat with them and meditated with them, led them into meditation, taught them how to meditate. Not the children, of course, but when the children grew up, they had a choice. And you make a choice. A good example is Tara Jauhar, who grew up as a child in the ashram school, and one day she had a huge crisis in her life, so bad that it was almost, she was ready to leave the ashram. And the mother decided to help her to prevent that. And so Mother said, the only solution for your problem is to find your psychic being. And this is, remember, 1971-72, when Mother was so full of responsibilities and the difficulty of even the biology age. She tells Tara, you will come every day and we will meditate together for 15 minutes to help you find your psychic being. And she did that every single day. Eventually, though, things changed. I think after Mother left her body, Tara left to go to Delhi. And Mother used her to build the extraordinary thing which you saw in the video. But the point I'm making is, it's only when she had a crisis and she needed to make that change that Mother said, okay, now we will meditate. But that was not the case with the sadhaks who came in the beginning of the ashram. All of them, without exception, would meet the Mother several times a day for intense concentration and meditation. Once in the morning to prepare for the day, once in the evening before retiring for the night, in between sometimes 1 or 2 times. Each time she would infuse her force into them. But there was an effort to be made every day and several times, and then extending it into the work. And all this is now conveniently set aside because it's convenient not to make that effort. So I had a friend who joined the ashram. He was working in one of the departments. Every time there was tea break and everybody would go drink tea, have sweets, he would rush to the ashram, concentrate at the samadhi and come back to work. And the others got upset. They said, you should not be doing that. That's not the way to do yoga. Do your work. Mother will do the rest. Don't go to the samadhi. So all this is to say that you have to make a choice. Will you make that effort? And if you do, how much can you commit? Start with what you can. And as I said, 1 minute a day is not impossible. 5 minutes even is easy. Because we do spend at least an hour and a half every day for eating food. What about nourishment for the soul? Some years ago, there was a lady from Aurobindo who came to meet. Some of you would know her, Bhavana, from Verite community. And she said, I've just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and I've been given 3 months to live. And she said, I realize now that all these years I did everything possible which interested me. I never stopped to do what was interesting or nourishment for my soul. I neglected my psychic being all these years in doing all these other things. And now I realize that's the only thing which matters. And she described what she was doing, which was for her nourishment, for her soul. A month later, we met again. Her entire personality, everything had changed. It was the result of 1 month of sadhana. And then she passed away approximately 3 months after, whenever it was. And I ask myself this question: if this were to happen to me, what if all of us, each one of you, think about it, if you were told you have 3 months to live, how would your priorities change? Would you still find it useful to go and watch this latest movie that's just come out? Probably it would be meaningless, isn't it? Would you still be interested in the latest confusion and chaos that's happening in some war or somewhere, or some conflict on television between some ideology or other? Pointless. What would you want to do? Think about it. And perhaps if 3 months is too long, give yourself 1 week. What if you were told you have 1 week to live? What would be the most intense in your priority? Think about it. Note it down. Maybe you come up with 1, 2, or 3 things. If the list is long, shorten the time more until you get 2 or 3 things, or 1 thing that you want to do, which would be for you nourishment for the soul. Take that and now decide here and now, from today, not even from tomorrow. You don't, many people say, we'll start from tomorrow. No, start today. Give yourself 5 minutes for that nourishment, whatever it is that you feel worthwhile. Start today after this conference is over. If it is doable within, when we have the closing meditation, start now. Otherwise, immediately after, or immediately after your lunch, sit quietly, do your 5 minutes of whatever it is that you need for your soul's nourishment. And hereafter, every day. And if someday you don't even have those 5 minutes, do it for 1 minute. And if nothing else, before going to sleep, or before eating, or after eating. There's no excuse for not doing it for 1 minute. And if it is truly felt by you as nourishment for the soul, the concentration on your soul, psychic being, center of aspiration within for that 1 minute or 5 minutes will be the beginning of your real sadhana. But it must be an intense concentration that is worthwhile for you if you have just a few more days to live. Not doing it as a routine. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to sit, close my eyes and my mind wanders. Remember, you have 1 week left or 1 day left. What would that be? What would be the intensity of your concentration? You have 1 minute left. How total will be that concentration? Let that be your minute. Starting today. And every time that you hear these phrases, oh, it will happen in its own time, have patience, wait, recognize it for its error. Yes, patience is required. For what? For the things which you can't do. But for the things which you can do, you should be doing them now. And understand the nature of the role of personal effort. I want to read from a letter of Sri Aurobindo, which was written to Sahanadi. This was a woman who faced often around her, remember this is while Sri Aurobindo is in the body, faced around her criticism of Sri Aurobindo, even abusive criticism by certain people in the ashram. And she said, whenever I hear this criticism, I get angry. I cannot control myself. So her problem is, should I maintain my equality and samatha and say nothing, or should I speak up and defend you? Consider this our life problem as regards what spirituality means for us versus this passivity that comes with the ascetic approach. So Sri Aurobindo's response, it's a bit longish, but I will read, I expect the whole of it. No doubt, hatred and cursing are not the proper attitude. It is true also that to look upon all things and all people with a calm and clear vision, to be uninvolved and impartial in one's judgments, is a quite proper yogic attitude. Remember, it's a backdrop of an attitude. A condition of perfect samatha can be established, in which one sees all as equal, friends and enemies included, and is not disturbed by what men do or by what happens. The question is, whether this is all that is demanded from us. So understand the place of samatha, equality, as a backdrop. Irrespective of whatever happens, there should be a poise within, even if not on the surface, a poise in which you are able to maintain that equality. But that's not all. What more? The question is whether this is all that is demanded from us. If so, then the general attitude will be one of a neutral indifference to everything. I'd been to a monastic spiritual tradition, and the monks there were of a very high spiritual order. They were truly deeply centered, some of them almost arresting an influence of the self, genuinely. And in that order, I'd gone with a friend. The friend asked, "What do you have to say about all this increasing confusion in the world?" And the monk said with a very deep calm and smile, he said, "Wait for another 300 years, it will all pass." You're given this advice from the ascetic traditions, this too shall pass. And it's a way of dealing with immediate situations. But the passivity of it is an error also. The equality is the truth, but the lack of action is a falsehood. So Sri Aurobindo continues, but the Gita, which strongly insists on a perfect and absolute samatha, goes on to say, fight, destroy the adversary, conquer. If there is no kind of general action wanted, no loyalty to truth as against falsehood, except for one's personal sadhana, no will for the truth to conquer, then the samatha of indifference will suffice. You see, all the things which he says, if they are not there, then you can be in a samatha of equality, of indifference. What are the things which are not there? Loyalty to truth. General action first. General action not needed in your life? No, of course you do need. Loyalty to truth, do you need it? Okay. As against falsehood. Will for the truth to conquer. Do you really want the truth to conquer? Or do you say, no, I don't care? And there are some who might say, it's okay for them. Then the samatha of indifference will suffice. But, and here comes one of the most important statements of Sri Aurobindo, which does not apply to the bulk of the ascetic traditions and religious and yogic lineages, because their goal is totally different. And so he says, but here, there is a work to be done, a truth to be established, against which immense forces are arranged. Invisible forces which use visible things and persons and actions for their instruments. So when he says, here there is a work to be done, obviously at that moment, because he's writing to Sahana Devi, it's in the Sri Aurobindo ashram, in the community of the ashram, there is a work to be done, a truth to be established. Against the work, against that truth, immense forces are arranged. Immense, you must understand what that means. These are they are universal forces, whose job it is to oppose the divine will and the evolutionary uplift. To destroy as much as they can of any good that comes up. That's their job. And they're immense. So we are puny. Even as a collective in the ashram, we are puny. Okay? And he says, the immense forces are arranged. They've arranged themselves. Have you arranged yourself? Is your work, is your effort to realize something and to establish the truth organized? They are organized far more than you. They've been organized for thousands of years to oppose. Isn't it? We're just beginning to organize a possibility of a greater life or truth. And he says, invisible forces which use visible things and persons and actions for their instruments. So we make a distinction. Even if you find yourself opposed by people or circumstances, you recognize they are tools, they're instruments. You don't blame them, you don't have personal hatred towards them, and the poise of equality is possible. You realize there are forces which use them. And the way it works is very strange. A person who's very genuine in intention, if they have an entry point or a flaw, and we'll discuss what the flaws are, the force can sneak in and nudge them. And if the flaw is such that the nudge is not noticed, they get swayed. Mother had to face this problem all the time in the ashram in Aurobindo. There's a very good example of a person who she assigned to become the head of education in Aurobindo. And this woman was extremely competent for what she had to do. She goes there and starts doing all kinds of weird things. It'll be even disturbing to say what she was doing with children. So I don't say it. But something, imagine, would be disturbing to say. And the reports come to the mother. And mother says, what can I do? When I gave her that task, she was not like that. Once she's gone there, something has changed. And this is often the case when you're put in a position of power. The chair on which you sit, the power of the chair invades you, clouds your mind, clouds your judgment, gives you a sense of as if you're free of error, you cannot make a mistake. It was one of these popes which said this. Earlier I didn't, what's the word for that? Where you cannot make a mistake. Not invincible, that's power. You can't make a mistake. Infallible, that's the word, infallible. And the papal infallibility was one of the things taught in the church. And this pope said, I didn't believe it until I became pope, and then I felt it. What he felt was the power that comes with the seat, with the force of the lineage, which seizes you and gives you this heady feeling, I can't make a mistake because I wield such power. That happens even in small chairs. But that's the nature of the power. And so in the ascetic tradition, they refuse power, they refuse wealth because it can warp your ego. But the correction is not to refuse because it comes in other ways. It goes in the other extreme. I am so humble, I am so poor, I am so powerless, I am so great. You see? The disciple goes to the master and says, I want to be your most humble disciple. And the master says, even in humility, you want to be the most special. Right? That's the ego hiding under that appearance. And so it does not help to avoid. You accept what comes, work on yourself. And that's where what said, the little things, little ambitions, little personal interests which cloud, and the nudge that comes catches you, and you do not discriminate. You do not recognize that, oh, you've just been clouded. So these are the ways by which the forces work through people. And once they've got sucked into that, they've taken a position, they're stuck. And then they have to justify their position and the divisions increase. This is what you see in our collectives. All of this I'm saying applies to all of us where we are. Here, there is a work to be done, a truth to be realized. And this is what the center, the La Grace, is about. This is what each one of us is about. Isn't it? In your own life, you want to realize something. And naturally, the very fact that you start that, forces, which are organized because they're universal forces, well, they're present, they do their thing, you do your thing. But you have to take a side. So, if one is, Sri Aurobindo continues, if one is among the disciples, the seekers of this truth, one has to take sides for the truth. To stand against the forces that attack it and seek to stifle it. You cannot say, I'm neutral, when it's a conflict between truth and falsehood. You have to take sides with the truth and against the falsehood. Why does he make these two statements? It's very important. It's not enough to be, I'm for the truth. I'll ignore the rest. Isn't it inconvenient? No, you have to be against the falsehood actively also. You see, in the ascetic traditions, and this is often these phrasings percolate into the Sri Aurobindo ashram community because it sounds so nice. No, be equal, be impartial, don't take sides, be quiet, watch these things, they will pass, have patience, mother will do it. How will mother do it? If those forces use instruments, Mother also needs instruments, isn't it? Will you be one of those instruments who will stand for the truth and against the falsehood? Or will you be an instrument who takes neutrality and therefore actively supports the falsehood? Either way, you're an instrument. You have to choose, you have to take sides. You cannot avoid being an instrument, one way or other. And Mother needs instruments. Sri Aurobindo continues, Arjuna wanted not to stand for either side, to refuse any action of hostility even against assailants. Sri Krishna, who insisted so much on samatha, strongly rebuked his attitude and insisted equally on his fighting the adversary. Have samatha, he said, and seeing clearly the truth, fight. Now, Sri Aurobindo concludes, having said all this, therefore, to take sides with the truth and to refuse to concede anything to the falsehood that attacks, to be unflinchingly loyal and against the hostilities and the attackers, is not inconsistent with equality. This is the great corrective we have to make in the context of the integral yoga, where the goal is not withdrawal or passivity, but an active realization of a truth. It is personal and egoistic feeling that has to be thrown away. Hatred and vital ill will have to be rejected. But loyalty and refusal to compromise with the assailants and the hostiles, or to dally with their ideas and demands and say, after all, we can compromise with what they ask for us, or to accept them as companions and our own people. These things have a great importance. This is quite a statement. Even to accept them as companions, to say, oh yes, of course, you are also child of the mother, you are also, as a great asura, participate in the great evolution, come, we are together in our effort. No, it doesn't work. Now this is true in a materialized form, in positions of forces and types in a conflict. It gets more subtle when the conflict is not so obvious. It gets even more subtle when the conflict is internal. Within you also there are pulls and pushes of various kinds, and you have to take sides. Who is the you taking sides? Well, whatever is your most developed center of awareness. Some part of your intellect, some part of your deeper center of devotion, bhakti, or still deeper influence which might come. But the center that you're aware of should be very clear, even when within you there are these conflicting pulls and pushes. This would be the sadhana, or at least a significant part of the sadhana in our preparation. But the point is action, not passivity. And then Sri Aurobindo explains by analogy, he says, if the attack were a physical menace to the work, and the leaders and doers of the work, one would see this at once. But because the attack is of a subtler kind, can a passive attitude be right? It is a spiritual battle, inward and outward. By neutrality and compromise, or even passivity, one may allow the enemy forces to pass and crush down the truth and its children. By neutrality and compromise, or even passivity, the truth could be crushed. Look at these three words a little more carefully. Neutrality, compromise, passivity. My teacher, Sri M.P. Pandit, who was Mother's secretary for the bulk of his life, who had worked deeply in the very central workings of the ashram, almost on every significant activity at different phases of his life, reporting to Mother almost daily during certain periods. When he was about to leave his body a month before, one of the things he said to me, which was very unusual at the time, first he narrated to me how his own teacher had passed and certain circumstances of an occult nature relating to that. And that was his way of preparing me for his own passing. And it was very odd. We actually stood on a threshold. Normally when you speak, you move into a common room. He entered his room and turned around. I had not yet entered his room, so I was in the other room. And there was the threshold in between, and he just spoke all these things. It was very significant. And a month later, he left his body. One of the things he said at that point, he said, Shraddhalu, never compromise. Remember, never compromise. We have all had to compromise, he said. We have all had to compromise. And again he repeated, never compromise. And I wondered, what was that about? Later in life, there were these occasions where it would have been convenient to take certain sides that worked, but you had to stand for something more true in spite of the consequences. Then that's when I realized, sometimes it's a very fine balance. The consequences are enormous, because once you have taken the side even a little bit, the split is complete. And life will always throw such situations at you. Not only externally, but much more internally. When you make a small compromise internally, where you know that you're accepting something false, the split begins. And very quickly you find yourself stuck on the wrong side. And then you have to go through a long process of correction. But all this is to highlight the importance of action against indifference, compromise, and passivity. So, Sri Aurobindo concludes, if you look at it from this point, you will see that if the inner spiritual equality is right, the active loyalty and firm taking of sides is as right, and the two cannot be incompatible. And then just so that we don't warp out the message that he is conveying, he says, I have of course treated it as a general question apart from all the particular cases or personal questions. It is a principle of action that has to be seen in its right light and proportions. So we come to this principle of action. One of the reasons why Sri Aurobindo is also misrepresented or misunderstood is because a large part of his life he was in his room, not meeting people directly. For a very important reason, because the power of the supramental consciousness that he was bringing down and fixing into his own body was so intense that even to be in his physical presence was overwhelming for people. Even to look at him was sometimes overwhelming. And so he had to maintain that isolation. There's this incident where he is asked by somebody, between February darshan and August darshan, there's too much of a gap. And so, can you have a darshan in between? And Sri Aurobindo says, every time there's a darshan where people come to see him, and there's a transmission of experience. He said, every time there's a darshan, I have to reduce the intensity of the power, and the work I'm doing is greatly delayed. And so he did it because it was necessary or as a help to the sadhakas, but it delayed the work greatly. And this was the reason why he had to be in physical isolation, but in continuous correspondence for sometimes 8 hours a day, and an active action from the spiritual, psychological and other ways, and of course through the mother directly. So he was not really a recluse at all, but it is misrepresented by certain interests to show almost as if an ascetic type of withdrawal, which is completely false. In fact, the mother explains that all through till 1929 or 30, Sri Aurobindo had active plans and detailed plans for the work to be done once the spiritual realization had been completed of the supramental in his own consciousness, to go back into the world and act, to spread actively. And there is a hint mother gives of what those plans were, to start various centers for training of the youth all over India. It is only post 1929-30 when a certain decision was taken in the manner of the yoga itself that this got delayed. And the decision, it's a very subtle point. They had created, and Sri Aurobindo had explained this, that for the supermind to be able to come down into matter, an intermediate base of the overmental consciousness had to be established in the body, which should be the base which is wide enough of an infinity into which the supermind could settle. and the overmental gods had to collaborate there, for which Mother had worked for 2 years to infuse the energy and force of these gods into certain individuals to form like a bulwark and support around them. And when that was almost completed, and she showed it to Sri Aurobindo, of course he was actively part of that effort, but when she showed what was happening and how far it had gone, he said to her, this would create one of the greatest religions in Earth's history, because people were already demonstrating extraordinary powers. And he said, but we have to set aside the short-term goal for the long-term, and a decision was taken to withdraw that passage, so to say, or that process to reach the supermind and bring it to earth, and bypass that to bring it directly without that participation of those gods. Because the moment you brought an intermediate power, they have their own interests. And it would change the direction, it might even delay the full supramental revelation, because they wouldn't want that perhaps. Who knows? Because it's an intermediate power finally, even if powers of infinity. And so Sri Aurobindo took that decision, Mother went back, and she says in 2 hours she dissolved that entire construction. And all the links were cut. And I met one of these sadhakas in the ashram who was one of the special types. And he came away from that very disgruntled, because suddenly the power was withdrawn. The high that in which he was living was gone. And he said to us, we have this recorded interview, he said, I was becoming so powerful, Mother became jealous. So she withdrew the power from me. Interesting. She is so much more powerful that she can withdraw it, and yet he says, I was more powerful than her. But this is what happens when there is the direct infusion without the necessary base of purity. And that was, you could get a hint of what might have happened if that path had been taken. And so a decision was taken for the direct action of the supramental entering matter and so on, and the process naturally took much longer because of the lack of support from the collective. That what I call the base of the container around which this would be done. And that was further, it almost happened in the end of 1930s, the Second World War and the refugees coming in further delayed it and even say spoilt that form of action. Eventually Sri Aurobindo had to leave the body to complete that. So that's just an aside, but to tell you that he had active plans to spread it outward. And it is this which gives you a hint of why after 1956 the Mother encouraged many of these activities for expansion of creation of centers and so on. So I'm going to put this in context here for us, because this is extremely important. This center, La Grace Center, is one of those, the phrase which I think Sri Aurobindo has used, akhada. Akhada is a term used for a center where young people come to build their bodies, build their intellect, organized a healthy individuality, but dedicated to a higher ideal, a spiritual ideal. And this was part of Sri Aurobindo's plan, which plan is of course being executed. If he couldn't do it then because of those circumstances, he is doing it now. Not as obviously seen by his order, but you saw this happening in the United States when Sri Aurobindo authorized Haridas Chaudhary to set up the CIIS, which is the Center for California Institute for Integral Studies. And he did a brilliant job teaching and expounding upon Sri Aurobindo's teachings and writings, and even an aspect of the practice. But when he left, when he passed away physically, the entire center was hijacked by individuals who are openly hostile to Sri Aurobindo, and the whole thing was lost. And I'm saying this, well, reasonably publicly. It's a fact, because I've sat with those people. 2 of them were directors of that place. We were in a common platform, and I could hear them talk among each other. They were ridiculing Sri Aurobindo and speaking of other things, and then they laughed how they had tricked the audience into digressing from the whole discussion, the topic. They were supposed to speak, they had been paid to speak, and all they did was, so we have heard enough of other speakers, I want to hear your views. And they threw it back, and the audience just gave their opinions, and the time was wasted, and they were laughing about it. The hostility was so overt. And it still continues. Of course, there's a public appearance one keeps. A center, an opportunity, an akhada which would potentially have grown to be something so valuable is lost. Now it's a very mixed center, even though founded at that time. We have to be conscious. That's why I read that letter. There are forces organized. And we have to be very clear about what we have to do. No passivity, no compromise, no indifference. There's an active work to be done. So, we have many other centers in the United States. And I made this observation yesterday when Radhe was presenting the entire program. I said, wow, this is the first center that I'm aware of in the United States where 24 hours there is an activity of propagation and research and development. Now, not everyone can do that. It needs certain financial base. But the fact that it is there is a huge step. And while other centers with their limited capabilities may do it not 24 hours, but weekly or otherwise, that's extremely valuable also. What is not valuable is that they meet once a year to pass some papers. And this happened, I had been to a state in India, which was one of the centers which had been created later by the society, which had gone defunct. And because I happened to speaking in some public occasion, 3 people came up. And they said, we are so and so. I am president, I am treasurer, I am secretary, and there's a 4th person who couldn't come of our center. So I said, wonderful, and what do you do in your center? We meet 4 times a week on darshan days and we meditate and go back home. Virtual center, And they were just the officials, and that was it. Nothing happening. Not useful. On paper perhaps, but not useful in consciousness terms. You may meet once a week. Yes, that is certainly useful. But if you meet only 4 times a year, okay, perhaps for some people it is useful instead of nothing else, but spiritually, in terms of a sustained development of growth of consciousness, it doesn't change much. It becomes almost a religious occasion. Feel good, go back, change nothing. And we have to be very careful about that. We need real growth, real change, not feel good by which you lapse back into your old pattern of what you were in consciousness. Feel good is useful. I'm not criticizing that. That's very useful. I had met people also who say how precious it is to have that momentary contact. But you use that contact to go back to your routine of life with no change in consciousness, not very useful. Because the goal here is the work to be done, not merely feel good and go back. There are many centers, I've seen that in India and elsewhere. People come, they want to listen to something entertaining, feel good about it, and that's all. And it doesn't matter who it is. It could be from Sri Aurobindo, it could be from XYZ tradition, as long as you felt good and were entertained, that's it. And good for them if that's all they seek. But we have to choose whether we'll be stopped with that also. Certainly have your entertainment when it's needed. But our goal should be to go much more in real change. We should be able to look back after a year, 151st anniversary, and say, from 150th to 151st, I have grown. And more than normal. I met a lady in the ashram. She'd been there 50 years. And I said to her, most people in the ashram don't know what is Sri Aurobindo's yoga. She was very upset. She said, how dare you say that? I said, well, you tell me. She had a blank. And then she said, but I'm sensitive, I feel the presence when I approach the ashram. I can feel it from far. I said, yes, we are a gathering of very sensitive and aspiring people, but not of practitioners of the yoga. And then I asked her, then she said, but I have grown in the last 30 years. I said, yes, you have grown, for sure. But compared to somebody else who is not in the ashram, how much have you grown? She said, pretty much the same. I said, then what yoga have you done? If living outside the ashram and living in the ashram you had the same growth, that's not yoga. Yoga is an intensification and an acceleration of the evolution. I think Swami Vivekananda says 1,000-fold, but even if we aim at 10-fold, should be good enough. Or 2-fold at least. Twice as much as the other. Otherwise it's not yoga really. So that should be our reference. And yes, entertainment serves certain parts in our nature. We need that in certain parts of the vital, mental, and even in the physical. And it helps them raise, purify, uplift in preparation for a more complete transformation. So I'm not decrying or criticizing that. That's needed, but just that is not good enough. There has to be a significant change in our consciousness. At least for those of us who feel this as our priority. And again, to the degree you feel it priority. Not everyone will say every day. Some may say every week, some may say every month. But after a year, you should be able to look back and say, yes, I have grown much more. If you feel so drawn every day, you should be able to look back and say, I have grown. But don't set that as too rigid a reference. If it's too much, look back every week. Every week you review, because in the week you're busy in your work. When you sit down on your Sunday concentration, give yourself time to go deep, to concentrate, and refer to how much you have grown. And if you have not grown, then that time was not suitably spent. Not always the growth is obvious, but you will feel a difference. And you can use the reference of interesting. Remember, interesting equals growth? Is your life interesting? Is your immersion in the consciousness, in the closeness with the mother, interesting? If it is, then you're growing. That's a very simple measure of the growth. You feel the deep joy and the growth of that joy, or at least the sustenance of that joy, then you're growing. If suddenly you feel your life empty, hollow, you're disconnected, then you're not growing. Make the necessary corrections. So I will conclude now. All this, in summary, was to bring in context the 150th anniversary. Yes, that is important, but the importance we give to it is more important. The preparation we make for it is more important. The continuation after it will be even more important. It will be pointless if we stop after. Right? So let's focus upon the preparation every day and the continuance every day for the rest of our lives, but with an active effort, taking sides for the truth, to consciously ensure a growth in our own consciousness. And for those of us who are more close to this physical space or interacting virtually with La Grace Center, let all the interactions we have lead to some growth. One little bit that you can look back and say, before we did this, I was different, I have grown a little bit. And next year when we come back, perhaps we can review if our time was usefully spent in the year. Every day, give yourself those 5 minutes for that one thing you would do if you had a week to live or a day to live. But live it for those 5 minutes or 1 minute intensely, entirely. Having said all this, there's one thing we have entirely missed out, which is being missed out entirely by the government of India and by all the excitation around 150th anniversary celebrations of Sri Aurobindo's birthday. And left out is the Divine Mother, who is not different from Sri Aurobindo. She is his energy in action, his power of manifestation. She is Sri Aurobindo in his dynamic aspect. And since our goal is the action, she is the means. So at least for us, the 150th birthday is equally 150th birthday of the Divine Mother. And when it is the birthday of your divine parents, the creative consciousness and the manifesting power, their combination gives birth in the Veda to Agni, the divine will, the aspiration deep within us. We too are born of them, and to that extent with them, isn't it? So it is our birthday. Think of it in this way and actively live the message of Sri Aurobindo. That's the greatest gift you can gift to him. What you give as yourself to the Divine Mother in a consecration, in a surrender, to be an instrument for her action in the world. You are first the territory of her action, and second the territory around you. What you gift should be as completely as possible and as entire as possible, as exclusive as possible. And then when you open, she fills you with her love. She fills you with her peace, her light, knowledge, power, bliss. And all these, first a trickle and then a flow. You have to be the container that holds it. The pot of the Veda into which the soma is poured. If it is unbaked, it breaks because it's not strong enough. As we are not strong enough for her infinity to pour down. Even her finiteness in a large wave would break us. And so the tapas, the concentrated effort that we make to immerse in her consciousness, bakes the whole being and prepares us to receive more and more of what she pours. This is the way of the sadhana in the integral yoga. We may take a moment to concentrate in our aspiration to prepare ourselves for the birthday, our birthday, their birthday, for the rest of our lives. That every day we may grow closer, more completely given, more exclusively given to the love of the Divine Mother, her knowledge, her strength, her force, that we may be lifted into her heights and transformed by her touch as active focal points for her action on earth.